Las Vegas for a special edition of our show. I'm joined by almost 2,000 people who care enough about liberty to come here to a conference called Freedom Fest, billed as the world's largest gathering of free minds. And this year, Freedom Fest's topic is Big Brother. The phrase comes from George Orwell's 1984, a novel about a totalitarian future where people are watched constantly and government reminds people Big Brother is watching to scare people who might oppose the regime. So is that America today? Well, this group says that. And yes, say people from Tea Party groups like Matt Kibbe of Freedom Works and Jenny Beth Martin of Tea Party Patriots. But before we talk to you about that, let's talk about another way some say government controls us, by manipulating our money. And you say that's a form of Big Brother. Steve Forbes of Forbes magazine. What do you mean?
Well, money is a measure of value. And when the government manipulates it, it picks winners and losers. It hurts the economy. John, since we've gone off the gold standard, our growth rates have fallen. We'd be 50% larger today. And
so what do you mean by manipulate it? They're not manipulating. They want to keep it stable.
Stable? They keep changing the value. You have 60 minutes an hour. Imagine if the Fed did to the clock what they do to the dollar, the Federal Reserve. You have 60 minutes an hour one day, 48 minutes the next, 22 the next. It'd be chaotic. Imagine you bake a cake. It says bake the batter 45 minutes. Now, is that nominal minutes, inflation-adjusted minutes? And
they do this by printing more money, buying bonds.
Buying bonds in other ways. The head of the Federal Reserve went before the Senate and said she wants 2% inflation, which will cost the typical American family $1,000 extra each year, and not one senator asked her that. Where did you get the authority to levy a $1,000 tax on the American people?
People on the left, you have your supporters here. People on the left say 2% inflation is pretty good, and we need to have this to goose the economy, to end unemployment.
It hurts the economy.
But are they all stupid? They all went to fancy schools.
Well, they once thought that the sun revolved around the earth, and some of them are still at universities today, only in the economics department.
You would have no Fed, but the data I have here shows that before the Fed, there were 9 recessions in the 30 years right before. 30 years after, 6 recessions, fewer. The last 30 years, 3 recessions. So maybe they're doing something right.
No, John. They look back and always say everything's a recession. If you don't have stable money, you don't invest in the future, and we all pay the price for it.
Gold is just a metal. Why pick this for value?
Because better than anything else, and this is 4,000 years of experience, and I'll take over that over Washington politicians listening to flat earthers, but in terms of intrinsic value, gold keeps its intrinsic value better than anything else. Money just represents what people produce in the marketplace. That's why counterfeiting is illegal, because it's a form of stealing. If in the private sector you do it, counterfeiting, you go to jail. In the government, they call it stimulus.
So a lot of people here are worried about massive inflation. I'm worried about it too. And so they buy gold, I bet. How many of you have bought gold? This is an unusual audience. I'd say most of you put your hands up. So, I mean, how do people buy it? I have some with me. They sell things like, this is a 1-ounce coin. It's $1,300. And the advantage of these things is what? That if there's massive inflation and it costs $5,000 to buy a loaf of bread, the baker will know the value of this and will honor this.
Gold always survives politicians. And that's why it's not so much an investment, John, but a form of insurance against malpractice, economic malpractice by our authorities.
Some of you have also bought silver like this. This is $200 worth. The other part of the nanny state, you two are from the Tea Party. You got picked on by the IRS. Spy, that's certainly Big Brother.
They held up our nonprofit status for our tax application. And
because the rule is you're not supposed to be too closely aligned with politicians, and it's complex.
Well, it's a rule that's been in place since like 1957, I believe. All of a sudden in 2010, they had trouble understanding what that rule meant.
And Tea Party groups were checked out at a rate 10 times other groups.
The Inspector General for the Treasury Department said that conservative groups were targeted 100%. 100%. So the Inspector General has said that.
And what targeted means is not just show us your paperwork. It was show us this and then show us that and again and again.
Show us, they asked lots of questions.
What was on your Facebook page? What's the password? Every speech you gave. And
speeches, not just speeches that I gave, but speeches of the people that we had who attended, who came and spoke at our events. And after that, there are many people around the country who are afraid to speak out because they're afraid to be associated with us and may get audited.
And you would answer the questions, and then they would come back with 100 more questions.
They'd come back with more questions, and they would delay and delay and delay as they were waiting to ask the questions.
You clearly are doing something right. You have 1.3 million Facebook fans.
Yes.
And Matt, you wrote a book titled "Don't Hurt People," which is a pretty good title. What's your point?
My point is that the values of liberty that unite all of us are quite simple. It's what your mom taught you. She probably stole it from her mom. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. Take responsibility for your own actions. This is the basic rules that apply to everybody that subscribes to the ideas of liberty. The difference between us and them is that you don't know what their agenda is, but you know that they have the ability to target you because you might hurt them. That's what's so scary about what's going on today. It's a rule of man instead of the rule of law. And our argument is quite simple. We should treat everybody just like everybody else.
And clarify that. Rule of man versus rule of law. A lot of people would say, well, I'd like someone to make a judgment. That rule of man sounds more adjustable than rule of law.
2 words, Lois Lerner.
We got... And our letters were signed by Lois Lerner, and our emails mysteriously disappeared.
Now, a lot of Americans want anonymous bureaucrats to act because some people want to kill us. And so the NSA gathers data and says it's protecting us from terrorists. What's your problem with that?
Lindsey Graham, of course, says that this is perfectly fine because he says if you're doing nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide. Well,
this is the Republican senator from South Carolina.
Sort of a Republican, yeah.
If you're doing nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide. A lot of Americans would agree with that.
Of course, the principle of justice is innocent until proven guilty. They have targeted every single American that has made a phone call since 2006. They got your data, they got your stuff, and we know from what we've seen that the NSA is just like the IRS. They're not using it to protect us, they're using it to target certain people with agendas. They've gone after old girlfriends, they've gone after old boyfriends, and if they'll do it to them, why wouldn't they do it to us?
They have done it to some, mostly old girlfriends, I think. They even had a name for it, Love Int, when they caught the people checking up. I just wanted to see where she was, they would say. But how have they really gotten us? They haven't locked people up. The Washington Post says some attacks were prevented.
It's not what they have done, it's what they can do. And Lois Lerner has proven the point that you can't trust anybody. Nobody's good enough, nobody's smart enough, nobody's virtuous enough to have all of this discretionary power over the rights of Americans.
All right, let's talk about the big brother parts where we may not agree. And Steve, I really admire what you've done. You fought for economic freedom. But on some social issues, I think you're big brother because...
That's what my daughters say, you know.
Well, you're supposed to be an authority to your kids. That's different. But you don't want me to have the right to kill myself if I'm old and sick? You don't think people should have a right to assisted suicide?
Doctors are supposed to save lives, not kill lives. And
isn't that police state too? It's my life. It should be my choice, I say. How about, all right. Illegal drugs. It's my body. Don't I own it? Can't I take what I want?
even with liquor, you have certain ages, you have certain rules, because you have certain ages, you may not make the right decision.
All right, at age 21, I can have heroin?
No, because heroin is one of those drugs that when you take it, it is unmerciful. Smoking, booze, you take it, you can usually get over it. Girlfriends, you can usually get over them. But heroin is an easily addictive drug, so therefore, real rules have to be needed.
Do you agree? Rules against heroin? Most say no. What about you, Tea Party?
Oh, I think you should be free to do what you want as long as you don't hurt people or take their stuff.